I suppose the point I'd like to make is firstly about the bill itself. As you mentioned, I did transform. We've been producing books like this on how to regulate cannabis, looking at it from a very much a public health perspective. What are the details of how you can do this in an effective way that will improve the outcomes over and above the conspicuous failings of prohibition and the war on drugs? And we worked with the Federal Task Force in Canada, developing their model for Regulation Canada, and we've worked with the Uruguayan Government, and we've worked with the Mexican government, and we fed into, in a small extent, we fed into the New Zealand bill as well. Legalization, regulation is not a single thing. You can do it better or you can do it worse. I think almost any approach would be better than the horrors of prohibition. But there are multiple jurisdictions now around the world that have gone down this path, and I think some have done it better than others. A lot of people have expressed concerns around some of the more commercialized models in the US. In Uruguay, arguably they went the other way and had almost like a sort of state monopoly, maybe an over-restrictive model in some respects. And Canada has perhaps kind of cut a furrow between those two sort of poles, the more restrictive state model and the more commercialized sort of US model. And we're kind of living through almost a kind of natural experiment with different approaches being adopted in different jurisdictions, giving us information and knowledge and data about what works and what doesn't. And I think what's really reassuring about the New Zealand bill is that clearly they have been absorbing all this knowledge and all these experiences. Many of the concerns that have emerged around the US model, some of the commercialized models, issues around some of the kind of cannabis-infused gummy bears and all of this stuff, that there's been a lot of scaremongering around. These things have been responded to. What you're looking at with the New Zealand bill is really quite a cautious, I think even conservative, strictly regulated approach. And I think it's, I don't agree with absolutely everything in it. But like you say, it can evolve. It's not written in stone. They will look at what's working, what's not working, and it will grow through in time. But overall, I think this is a very solid, reasoned, public health driven piece of legislation. I think it's responsible. I think it's well thought through. I think there are some bumps in there, but generally, as someone who's worked in various countries looking at this, I think it is a good piece of legislation that has learned from what has come before. Particularly, it's looked at where there's been problems and it's tried to mitigate them in advance. And I just think it's a good piece of legislation. But again, it's not written in stone. It can evolve. But even if it wasn't as good, it's hard to imagine how anything could be worse than the status quo, because we have a status quo. We are spending millions of New Zealand dollars every year pursuing a policy that is delivering terrible, terrible outcomes. It's criminalizing lots of people, giving them criminal records and punishing them, particularly young people, economically marginalized people, Maori, vulnerable communities. The heaviest burden of criminalization falls on the most marginalized and vulnerable everywhere, throughout history and throughout the world. And New Zealand is no exception to that. We are money to criminalize vulnerable people for no positive reasons at all. And it's not reducing use. New Zealand, as you mentioned, has one of the highest rates of cannabis use in the world already. And that's kind of the point. It's not like if we legalized cannabis, everyone would start doing it. Lots of people are doing it now, and policymakers have to deal pragmatically with reality. And the reality is lots of people are doing cannabis. Now, you may not like that. You may not like cannabis yourself. You may not approve of cannabis use. You may wish less people used cannabis. That's absolutely fine. But you have to look at the status quo and go, the status quo is not delivering anything positive. It's not improving health. It's not reducing criminality. It's not, it's not protecting young people. It's doing the opposite of all of those things. So what we have here is an opportunity to do things better. It's not going to be perfect. You know, we will never get rid of all the problems. We will never protect everybody. We will never get rid of all the health issues, but we can do better. So I think this bill is a real step forward. It gives us an opportunity to regulate this market, to control it, and to try and improve the outcomes, because there is no third option where that market disappears. Either we leave it in the hands of organised criminal groups and unregulated dealers, or we bring it within the ambit of an effective state regulatory system and put it public health people in charge. There's no third option where it magically disappears. So this is a fundamentally pragmatic position. It's not pro-cannabis, it's not pro-drugs, it's not saying drugs are cool or cannabis is cool. It's saying cannabis is here, let's regulate it and get better outcomes than the manifestly catastrophic disaster that is cannabis policy of the last 30 years. So please, please don't only just vote yes, get everybody you know who hasn't registered yet to register to vote, or if they have registered to vote, talk to them, persuade them, get them to vote yes as well, because this is a rare opportunity to do something good, to do something right, to influence policy in a positive direction. So please do vote yes, and I'll stop there, otherwise I'll rant on forever.